had the urge to say, Grandma has arrived. We've gathered here today to honor and celebrate the life of Carol Mackintosh. Carol left her earthly home on April 26, 2021, at the grand age of 89. She very much loved our Lord. In 1 Psalm 1-3, we read, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of the sinners, or sits in the seat of the mockers. But his delight is the law of the Lord, and of his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers." Let us bow our heads. God of grace, be with us and bless us as we've gathered here today. Give us the strength and the wisdom that we need for this time, the strength to face and endure our loss, and the wisdom to rise above our grief and find ample thanksgiving for Carol's life. God, keep us and give us comfort now. Your goodness is our strength. Your purpose is our hope. We give thanks now and forevermore. Amen. When I was contacted about this service, I thought, I should know this lady, but couldn't place her name. And then today when I came in and got her photograph, this lady used to come out to Lashburn for our theater productions. Know her well and can hear her laugh, so I did know her after all. I'm going to ask Teddy to come up. He's going to be doing a eulogy and cluing us in a little bit more about Carol. You don't have to keep it on.
Hello, and thank you all for coming. As a challenging time in many ways, I'm sure Carol is grateful for your efforts to be here for a celebration of her life. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Teddy, and I'm married to Carol's granddaughter, Kelly. At times like this, we often take time to reflect and ponder about the things of life which we determine give us purpose and meaning. The meaning of life, perhaps. The beauty and complexity of life, with all the ebbs and flows, are to be celebrated and cherished. Although I had only known Carol for a handful of short years in her full and storied life, like many of you here, I felt fortunate to get to know her. She was aware of many hats: wife, mother, grand and great-grandmother, sister, auntie, and friend. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. A simplified yet complex way of describing Carol would be, what a woman. Carol exemplified what it means to be full or live a full and rich life, from her early days of attending Sunny Valley School, to raising children, to running the show at the acreage just north of Kitscoty. Carol Louisa Mackintosh was born on November 8th, 1931, the second daughter of Carl and Mary Lindbergh in Dunderd, Saskatchewan. In total, she had 3 brothers and 4 sisters, so things were always busy in the house from an early age. Her school days began at Sunny Valley School and eventually attended Hanley School. Carol was a social butterfly who would make many friends. These school days were where she also began to channel some of her creative energy, as she liked to act in school plays, which seemed to fit well, as many of you may know that Carol could have a flair for the theatrics. Not long after finishing school, she started her life in the workforce. Carol was a bound and determined to succeed young lady. She worked hard at whatever she put her mind to. For a time, she worked at a place called Roy's Cafe, but shortly after, she ventured her way to Lanigan to work as a cook for a farming crew. This is where she would meet Lindsay and Eileen Blair, who would become her lifelong friends. But they weren't the only lifelong friends she would come to know. Carol would catch the attention of some of the local boys, but she would also draw the interest of one man in particular. A man that we all know by the name of Don. Legend has it that Don, not long after seeing Carol, said, "Hands off, boys, she's mine." The two lovebirds said they were two lost kids who had found each other. They would tie the knot on December 22nd, 1949, and were married for a mind-boggling 65 years until Don's passing in 2015. The following year, in November 1950, Carol and Don would become proud first-time parents to their bouncing baby boy, Brian. Shortly after, in 1952, Don and Carol would move the little family to Rivers, Manitoba, as Don got a job working at the military base as a civilian pipe fitter. Carol would also work there in the payroll department, and then in September 1953, they welcomed their sweet little girl Brenda into the world. This would complete their happy little family. They spent the next few years in Rivers and would build a new house in Spring Valley just down the road. After spending Saturdays going into Brandon to get her hair done while Don would tour hardware stores, Carol decided she needed a new hobby. It was the early 1960s, and Carol thought it would be a great idea to start jumping out of airplanes. But not just once, that wasn't enough. She became a bona fide skydiver. Don didn't argue. He told her he was content to just watch, and jokingly brought along a shovel and a sack in the trunk, just in case. This isn't to assume that all of Carol's hobbies were high-flying and potentially dangerous. Carol and Don would often go square dancing around the neighboring towns, and she was an avid bowler, and if they weren't doing that, they spent some considerable time traveling around with the kids' pipe band every summer. As in all of our lives, there were some bumps in the road, and in 1967, where the base where Don and Carol worked was preparing to close. So they were faced with the new challenge of what to do next. This didn't even faze them one bit. Don had accepted a good job working at a recently opened potash corp, and on the same day of December, 15 years after they had moved, they left and moved back to Lanigan. While Don was working his way up to be the maintenance foreman at Potash Corp, Carol also tried her hand at working at the mine. From what I'm told, it was short-lived as Carol got mad at someone telling her what to do and how to do something, so she quit. As we all know, Carol wouldn't take any guff from anybody. As her kids, Brian and Brenda, were getting older and more independent, Carol decided to take on a new challenge. And right out of the blue, she bought a ladies' wear store called Arnell Fashions, and she would end up running it for over 10 years. This gave her the freedoms to utilize some of her strengths and to find some new ones. Even seeing some of the older pictures of Carol and Don, they always dressed to impress. At the store, Carol was the boss, just like at home. She would help people feel good about themselves. She got to socialize, and she was afforded the freedoms of being able to give back, something Carol had always done throughout her life. She became a longtime member of the Lioness Club and would travel internationally to conventions. She volunteered for the Red Cross and would eventually become a medic and an ambulance driver, no doubt helping countless people along the way. With her credentials as a medic, she would also teach CPR in her spare time. In 1994, Carol went to the southern state of Georgia for 2 weeks with the Red Cross to help out the flood victims of the tropical storm Alberto. Even in her 60s, Carol was still giving back to communities near and far. Throughout her life, Carol took great pride in what she did. She was an unapologetically proud woman, and she had much to be proud of. Even just taking a look around here, you can see the mark that she had left on so many. Her wonderful children, Brian and Brenda, would grow up to find loving spouses of their own. Brian would marry Dixie, and together they had 3 children, Jesse, James, and Grady, making Carol a proud new grandma. And Brenda and Jerry would also have 3 children of their own, Dennis, Joey, and Kelly, helping round out the total number of grandkids to 6. Eventually, she would become a great-grandmother to 6 more little ones. Being a grandma brought Carol heaps of joy. I could tell from the first time I met her. She was the quintessential grandmother, strong, loving, honest, and always willing to share wisdom. She also baked some top-notch cookies, particularly her famous snickerdoodles. You knew they were always good when the certified quality control tester, Dawn, was right there at the counter with a cup of tea ready to verify each batch was as good as the last. After her and Dawn retired, they bought a cabin at Stony Lake, close to Humboldt, and spent many summers there, and in the winter would head south to Yuma, Arizona. During the summers when Jerry and Brenda lived in Edson, Carol would meet Brenda just west of Kitscotty and take Kelly and Joey and Whiskey the dog for a couple of weeks over the summer. This was when Kelly made the infamous toothpick holder, which Carol had no idea was being built under Don's supervision with power tools until it was finished. To pair that with the cabin at the lake, they bought a boat and named it after the two granddaughters, Kelly O'Grady. To this day, there still may be a few pairs of children's sunglasses lost at the bottom of the lake from water skiing. Carol and Don would celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary in Yuma. Their kids, Brian and Dixie and Brenda with Jerry, would be there to join the celebration. They actually got to have two parties as the kids planned a surprise anniversary party in September of that year in Lanigan. They tricked Carol and Don to coming to the hall, which was full of friends. They used a picture from that party to put onto the wine bottles for the party, which they snuck down to Yuma. It wasn't long after their 50th anniversary party, in the year 2000, Jerry and Brenda went down to Arizona to help Carol and Don pack up for a new endeavor in life. The four would work together to build an acreage just a few short minutes north of Kitscotty. This multi-generational home would grow full of memories and love just as tall as the trees and flowers that grow can be found all around the property. To this day, you can still find Carol's beloved rose garden just to the west of the pond. Carol would spend a great deal of time researching family trees, as family was always so important to her. This desire to know her roots led to her and Don taking trips to their respective countries of origin, Sweden and Scotland. And family was always welcomed warmly at the acreage. As soon as you would drive in, there would be Carol with her big smile, ready to offer you a cookie and a drink. She would spend countless hours tending to the garden, taking walks with Don down through the gully with their pups Spud and Tater, enjoying one of the multiple fire pits that they had on the acreage, and even enjoying the toboggan hill with the kids just a few short Christmases ago. It was truly home for Carol. She made it home for everyone who came. Even in her later years, she was finding new ways to give back. During her time at the acreage, she knit over 200 bonnets for the newborn babies at the Lloydminster Hospital. In the summers, she would volunteer at Camp Whitney at Whitney Lake. One of her favorite stories she told me was when a young boy was stung by a bee and became quite upset. They called the boy's mother to inform her of what happened, and as he hung up the phone, wiping away his tears, he turned to Carol and said, "My mom says I can give you a hug." She beamed when she told me that story, just the way she beamed at so many things in her life. In the spring of 2015, as health concerns began to grow and Don's dementia was not getting any better, Carol and Don decided to move to a place with a little more round-the-clock care and amenities. So with the help of Jerry and Brenda, they moved into the Hearthstone Place Senior Living Home. There was always lots to do, from in-house church services to game nights to crafts and even field trips. Unfortunately, Don's health faded, and shortly after, he passed away later that spring on May 29th. Carol, like she always did, persevered and continued to get the most out of life. Now that Jerry and Brenda didn't see her every day, there was sometimes a concern of how she was doing. And then all of a sudden, you'd see Carol in the newspaper, front and center, enjoying some paint night, or even on the news as part of a project for seniors sharing wisdom with the youths. When we would come to visit, the nurse would even surprise us with Carol is really good at table tennis. Who knew? Even in her 80s, she was still a social butterfly and was always part of the action. In closing, as we celebrate the life of Carol, we will be privileged to remember the best of her, because the best was all she would give, which seems quite fitting for this quote from one of Carol's favorite writers, Irma Bombeck. "When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I have not a single bit of talent left, and I could say, I used everything you gave me." Thank you for everything you gave us, Carol.
Eulogies are very hard to write, but I think she'd be very proud of this one and how it was presented. Job well done. I'll ask Cody now to turn on. We are going to have a PowerPoint presentation. If some of the pictures make you laugh, feel free to have a chuckle. not sure who put that together. Job well done. It was beautiful. I need to ask the family one question, though. Did Carol ever frown? Every picture, just the biggest smile. Just always. I'm just thinking she must have always been so happy. I spoke to Betty Evans in an effort to get to know who this woman, Carol Mackintosh, was. And I want to thank Betty because she was a wealth of knowledge. I had to chuckle as she told me how she met Carol. They met at the church doors. Betty was the greeter, and she immediately asked this newcomer if Carol could sing. I had to chuckle because I'm starting to think this must be a form of greeting with the United Church, because when my husband and I went for our first church service at St. James in Lashburn, guess what I was asked by the greeter? Can you sing? We need you in the community choir. Carol and Betty were found sitting in the alto section together for many years. Carol also spent 6 years working for Presbytery, and I give her congratulations for that. I managed 2 years, and that just about killed me. She also did kitchen duty at Camp Whitney for a number of years. Carol and Betty were also part of the ministering team that traveled to do services at Eiley, Pioneer Lodge, and at Pioneer House. I understand Carol was also instrumental in the landscaping of this church and was always ready to grab a paintbrush when needed, whether it be inside or outside. But Carol loved her flower gardens. Roses seemed to be a favorite. I heard from many about how beautifully she kept her yard and that the flower beds didn't even dare sprout a weed. She had a bench in her rose garden so she could sit and appreciate the beauty of God that surrounded her. I like to think that Carol was like a rose herself. She loved to dress well, and she always used bright colors to her advantage. She also had a beauty that shone from within her. Like the rose that only grows and flourishes when connected to the rest of the bush, so we are strengthened and nourished by the underlying source of all love. It strengthens us from the core of our being so that we can show love to all. And I believe that Carol tapped into this eternal source of love. Perhaps it was while she was tending her garden, feeling the richness of the soil between her fingers. Perhaps it was listening to the birds singing happy songs in the trees. Or perhaps it was just because she loved to be outside and enjoy the sunshine. Outside, amidst the sounds and sights of nature, it's often easier for us to feel that loving presence around us and within us. And Carol let that spirit shine out to her family and friends. I was told by one friend that Carol was an incredibly wonderful person, and another person called her an energized bunny, as they had worked together in the Kitscotty live theater productions. But as you know, roses, for all their beauty, have thorns. And I'm sure that Carol had hers, just as we all do. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because God loves and cares for each of us the same. He leads us beside the still waters. He restores our souls with rest and peace. The rose that was Carol has withered and died. She has gone back to the wonderful Creator who forms us, the source of all love. But she has left behind so many petals of love that we can remember her by. You know, she always had that beautiful smile on her face. And like I said, when I seen her picture, the first thing I thought of was her laugh. So I like to think that she had petals of laughter. I know she had a wonderful sense of humor. In fact, I was told that they maybe wouldn't tell all those jokes. This isn't the place. She had incredible wisdom. She was very giving, very sharing, and she loved receiving love and giving love. Carol was also a petal of friendship. Friends mentioned how she was always ready for tea time when friends dropped by. And I just love the display that the family made here today, because knowing how important tea time was to Carol, and here it is, all set up with her cookies, her goodies. It's just precious. I really appreciate the thought that has gone into this, because it really makes you know Carol. She was spiritual. She loved her church. She had a pedal set aside for music, and she loved dancing. Apparently, her very favorite dance was to be able to do the old-time waltz. Carol loved people, family, and friends, and Carol could be counted on within the community to provide chauffeuring capabilities whenever it was needed. I heard from many that hard work was not in her vocabulary. She just did what had to be done. And of course, there was the gift of her gardening. Remembering the gardening that she did, I'm going to ask Betty and Gail to come up, because they're going to sing a song that Carol asked Betty to remember, because she wanted it sung at her funeral. In the bud, there is a flower.
I'd just like you to know that I'm not Celine Dion, and this is Gail, but not Crystal Gail. So please bear with us. Pipes may be
clapping. They did so well. I heard yesterday that they were here practicing the pipes because apparently they haven't been doing a whole lot of singing lately. So thank you, ladies. I'm quite sure that Carol is enjoying that. Before I forget, because, I'm getting old and my memory's going elsewhere, it seems, I want to thank Cody Mazerow for coming out today and being the technician and the technical person, because if it was left to me and Donald, it'd be pretty sad. And I especially want to thank John. It is very hard to find pianists in this day and age, and this man is just so good at what he does. Thank you so much for being here today, and especially because he too was a friend of Carol's. I want to read to you from 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7 and verse 13. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. And now these three remaining, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Powerful words. The greatest of these is love. And I'm going to ask you to remember, as you grieve for Carol, remember those words. The greatest of these is love. I ask that you share your memories, share the laughter, as well as the tears. Grief is not an easy thing to get through, but remembering that love is the greatest of all of these will give you courage, hope, and compassion. I ask that you treasure, as you remember Carol, cherish all the petals that she has left for you. Think of her rose garden, and may they grow strong within you. May you too blossom with the light of love to shine for all to see. I'm just going to leave here for a couple of minutes and open the mic up to anyone that would like to come up, say a few words about Carol. How did she affect your life? How was she part of your life? Please feel free to come up now.
When I greeted Carol that morning at church and invited her to come into our choir, it opened up a very close friendship between the two of us. I had lost my husband in the year 2000, and 10 years later, my sidekick Nita left me. We had traveled a lot together, all three of us, and then Nita and I together. And, God works in mysterious ways, because he brought Carol into my life. She wasn't afraid to drive after dark, and she also loved so many of the same things that I did: music, drama, volunteering for things just to make the community better. And so, first of all, we were in choir. Then the Drama Society was here, the drama club, and I asked her if she would like to come into that. Well, sure enough. Then the next thing was the seniors. We had floor curling for seniors at the center, and she and Dawn came into that occasionally. She started all my bedding plants for me. Would never ever take anything for it. That was just her giving way. She gave to everyone that she knew. Mind you, Carol turned out to be sort of like my big sister, a little on the bossy side. And she could have days, not really frowned, but she would get a little bit huffy, and you knew that you had to pull in your horns a little bit, or there might be conflict. We had some fun times going to programs together. She had celebrity series tickets, and every once in a while Dawn would say, "Oh, I don't want to go to that." So Carol would phone me and I'd travel along with her. At one of these, we were sitting talking to someone at intermission, and I felt something funny in my mouth, and I said, "Good Lord, I've lost a tooth." Well, here she is down on her hands and knees looking in the carpet, and we found it. So down to the denturist I went and had my tooth put back on. Another time we were traveling through Lloydminster, and I noticed a big van on the right-hand side of us, on the passenger side, and Carol was keeping up with them all the way along, and all of a sudden I said, "Do you realize you went through a red light?" She said, "I did, but I don't think anyone would have hit us because the van was right beside us all the way." I don't know what else I can say. Oh yes, she conned me into going to presbytery, and I was a presbytery rep for a few times. We traveled together and stayed together. One time we were going to a seniors connection of some sort in Regina that she said, "Oh, you want to go? It's really fun." So she and Dawn and I went, and of course it was an overnight stay because it was a long trip for us after the thing was over, and we get to Battleford and Carol opens her suitcase. She didn't have her pajamas. We've had a lot of laughs over little things like that. We did figure out how she was going to be able to manage, but so I'm going to miss her terribly. I don't have my night driver anymore. I do have a lot of good friends, and I know that they go places and they're never at a loss to say yes if I do want to go along with them. But I am going to miss my buddy a lot. Thank you so much. I started something.
There you did.
I guess as much as anything, I wanted to assure Betty that you weren't alone in the, how did you word it, the odd, rough point? No, you used a different word. But I too, I think I understand what you're meaning, but I also agree that it passed quickly, and a lot of good times.
I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing from me, but I've got kind of a kooky Carol story. Like I said, I hadn't known Carol for as long as all of you have, but she welcomed me right away, and she was always very convincing in many ways. Anytime you came out to the acreage, she would always say, "Come here, I want to show you something." And it could be anything, some fancy flower in the garden that I had no idea, or she'd be working on some sort of a puzzle or knitting something. She'd be like, "Look at this." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, great," And but in the later stages, probably the one time she convinced me of something was when Grandpa Don was starting to get a little bit less independent. She thought, and they had some home care come to the house, but they had stopped coming, so she decided Jerry and Brenda were on a holiday, and Grandpa Don needed to have a bath. So she convinced the big strong man to take Grandpa Don for a bath, and well, some things you just can't forget or unsee. But Carol was very grateful that I had helped Dawn with that. And yeah, like I said, some things you don't forget, but Carol is one of a kind for sure, and she'll be missed. So.
I think we can all agree that this woman is going to be missed in so many circles. And I'm sure that we are all very grateful for having known her and her spirit, which I'm sure will carry on. My grandkids, when my mother died, my grandkids started finding dimes. And my littlest one came and said, "Look at Grandma's with us today." And she would find a dime. We finally had a neighbor made us a little jar and inscripted on it. And I just think, maybe it's going to be a butterfly, maybe it's going to be somebody's roses, but I think Carol will be telling you she's okay. I'm just going to come down to bless the urn. I know that at this point, the family doesn't know where her final resting place will be. I ask that you stay seated as we conclude this program and listen to Amazing Grace. In the spirit of love, we close this celebration of life for Carol. Let us go in peace and live together in charity, taking from and giving to one another as we need and as we are able. Share the gifts of courage, wisdom, thanksgiving, and love. Amen. I ask that the urn bearers come forward now, please.